There comes a moment in every soul's life when the light breaks through the fog, when the heart, weary from confusion, finally sees things for what they truly are. That moment, that sacred awakening, is not random. It is divine timing. It is when heaven whispers, "Enough." For so long, the narcissist made you believe their lies were reality. They painted themselves as the victim, as the hero, as the one who loved you most. They fed off your kindness, your loyalty, and your hope. Each time you forgave, they saw it as weakness. Each time you tried to explain, they saw it as control. They twisted good into evil and evil into good until you almost forgot what truth even sounded like. But then, something began to stir within you. A quiet voice that refused to die. It said, "This is not love. This is bondage." That voice was not your imagination. It was the Spirit of truth that Jesus spoke of in the Gospel of John chapter 16 verse 13, which says, "When the Spirit of truth comes, He will guide you into all truth." Before we begin this journey, it is a blessing to know from which part of the world you are watching and at what hour of the day God has guided you to this message. Truly, it is a joy to witness how the Lord gathers hearts from every corner of the earth, uniting them in one spirit and in one truth. And so, truth began to guide you, slowly, gently, painfully. At first, the realization broke you. The tears that followed were not just sadness, they were release. You were mourning the illusion. You were grieving the person you thought existed. But as your tears fell, heaven was washing away deception. Many wonder why God allows such people to enter our lives in the first place. The answer is not simple, but it is holy. God allows darkness so that His light can be recognized. He permits false love so that true love can be treasured. In the book of Psalms chapter 119 verse 71, it is written, "It was good for me to be afflicted, so that I might learn your decrees." Sometimes pain is the only classroom where wisdom can be taught. When you finally awaken, the world looks different. The same streets, the same rooms, the same faces, but your spirit no longer reacts the same way. You no longer chase after validation because you've learned that peace is more valuable than approval. You no longer try to fix what is broken in others because you've realized that healing begins with obedience, not with effort. This awakening is not just emotional. It is spiritual warfare. The narcissist's greatest fear is not your anger, it is your clarity. Because once you see the truth, you are no longer under their control. You no longer respond to manipulation because your spirit has recognized the pattern. It is like a prisoner realizing the door was never locked. Freedom was waiting all along. Some people may not understand this change in you. They might say you've grown cold, distant, or untrusting. But what they do not realize is that wisdom often looks like distance. Discernment often sounds like silence. And peace, true peace, often requires separation. When the Lord removes the narcissist from your life, it may feel like loss, but it is actually protection. What looked like rejection was really redirection. The Lord saw what you could not see. He heard conversations behind closed doors. He saw the deceit hidden beneath the smile. He waited until your heart was ready to see, and then He showed you everything. Your awakening is sacred. It is heaven's proof that your spirit survived. You were not destroyed. You were refined. You were not abandoned. You were chosen for clarity. But awakening is only the beginning. Because once your eyes are open, you must now learn how to walk in the light, even while the memories of darkness still echo in your mind. And that, beloved soul, is where the real battle begins. Every narcissist lives behind a mask. It is not a small disguise or a moment of pretense. It is a carefully crafted image built over years, designed to attract admiration and to hide emptiness. They wear charm the way others wear clothes, changing it for every occasion, adjusting it for every person they meet. To the world, they appear kind, confident, sometimes even godly. But behind that mask lies a spirit of deceit, manipulation, and pride. Their words sound like love, but their actions betray selfishness. Their smiles are practiced. Their compliments are strategic. Everything they do is for control, never for connection. This is why it takes so long for many to recognize what they are dealing with. The mask is convincing. It mirrors back the very image you want to see, the one that matches your hope, your love, your loyalty. In truth, they study you carefully, learning your desires, your fears, your weaknesses. They reflect what you long to find. That reflection is the bait. But reflection is not reality. It is only a surface illusion. The book of Proverbs, chapter 26, verse 24 says, "Enemies disguise themselves with their lips, but in their hearts they harbor deceit. The narcissist speaks words of peace, but their heart is set on conquest." In the beginning, you saw a soulmate, someone who understood you instantly, who admired your compassion, who promised forever. You could not see that their praise was not about love, but about ownership. To them, your empathy was a tool to be used, not a treasure to be cherished. They mirrored your values to gain your trust. If you loved faith, they quoted scripture. If you valued honesty, they told you they hated liars. If you cared about service, they pretended to be humble. But the mirror was only ever about reflection, not transformation. And here lies one of life's hardest truths. Deception often looks holy at first. Evil rarely appears in darkness. It often arrives dressed in light. As written in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14, "For even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light." This is why discernment is more precious than gold. Discernment is the spiritual mirror that shows what the physical eyes cannot see. It reveals the cracks in the mask. It exposes the motives hidden beneath words. When the Spirit begins to reveal, it does not show everything at once. Revelation comes in layers, slowly, mercifully, so the heart can bear it. You may recall moments when something felt off, though you could not explain why. Times when their words sounded right, but your spirit felt wrong. That quiet discomfort was not paranoia. It was protection. It was heaven's gentle alarm telling you that the reflection was false. As time passed, the mirror began to shatter. Their stories stopped matching. Their kindness turned cold. Their admiration became criticism. What once felt like partnership began to feel like prison. And in that moment, the truth began to shine through the cracks. The narcissist's greatest fear is exposure. They will do anything to keep the mask from slipping, deny, lie, shift blame, even play the victim. They cannot survive without admiration. The mask feeds their ego the way air feeds the lungs. But masks eventually crack under the weight of truth. And here's the miracle. God does not expose to shame. He exposes to free. When the mask falls, it is heaven's mercy, not heaven's cruelty. Because the truth that hurts today will protect you tomorrow. Standing before that shattered mirror is painful. You see both what they were and what you allowed yourself to believe. But do not condemn yourself for being kind. Love is not weakness. Compassion is not blindness. Your ability to see good in others is not your fault. It is your gift. The world needs more of it, not less. As you turn away from the broken mirror, a new reflection begins to form. Not of who they said you were, but who God always knew you were, chosen, strong, and free. Because now that the mask has fallen, it is time to see clearly in the light of truth. And when light reveals what darkness tried to hide, the story is far from over. For the next chapter is not about them. It is about you remembering the power you forgot you had. There was a time when your spirit was full of light, before the deception, before the exhaustion, before your confidence was slowly drained away. That light was never lost, only buried beneath years of manipulation, fear, and confusion. When you walked away from the narcissist, it felt like you were walking through fire. But what you did not realize then is that the fire was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to refine you. Every narcissist tactic is built on one central goal: to make you forget your power. They do not steal it. They convince you to hand it over. Through lies, through guilt, through constant blame, they create a world where you begin to doubt your own voice. You question your memory. You second-guess your every move. You apologize for things that were never your fault. But there is something the narcissist never understood. The light that God places within the heart cannot be erased by human deceit. It can be dimmed, yes. It can be buried under pain. But it cannot die. The book of John, chapter 1, verse 5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That light is your faith. It is your dignity. It is your worth. When you begin to see through their games, that light starts to flicker again. It begins as a whisper, a quiet reminder that you deserve peace. Then, it becomes a steady voice that tells you to leave. That voice is not weakness. It is spiritual awakening. During the relationship, the narcissist built an invisible prison around your emotions. The bars were made of guilt and fear, not iron or steel. You stayed because you wanted to fix things, to help them heal, to be the example of unconditional love. But unconditional love does not mean unconditional suffering. Even Christ, in Matthew chapter 10, verse 14, told his disciples that if people refuse to receive the truth, shake the dust off your feet and leave that place. Sometimes obedience to God means walking away from what breaks your peace. When you finally take that step, the ground beneath you shakes. It feels like losing everything, but heaven sees it as gaining freedom. That first night of silence feels heavy. You miss the routine, even if it was painful. You miss the illusion of closeness, even if it was false. But as each day passes, something begins to shift. Your body starts to rest. Your mind begins to clear. The fog that once clouded your heart starts to lift, and slowly, you begin to hear your own thoughts again. You start to laugh at small things. You remember songs you used to love, dreams you once had, places you once wanted to go. These are not random memories. They are the pieces of your soul returning home. You see, the narcissist never truly knew you. They only knew the version of you that served their purpose. But God knows every part of you, the tears, the prayers, the sleepless nights. Psalm chapter 56 verse 8 says, You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. Nothing you went through was wasted. Every tear watered the soil of your transformation. The power you forgot you had is not loud. It is not boastful. It does not need to prove itself. It is quiet confidence, holy strength, divine endurance. It is the ability to stand firm and say, "No more." It is the courage to walk through loneliness rather than live in false peace. The narcissist's power ends the moment you remember yours. That is why your awakening made them panic. They could feel that your energy no longer bowed to theirs. They sensed your spirit rising. And as you began to pull away, they grew desperate, because they feed on control. And you had finally starved that control. Your silence became a sword. Your distance became armor. Your peace became proof that they never truly broke you. And now, heaven begins to move on your behalf. Because the same power that opened your eyes will soon begin to open doors. But before the doors of victory swing wide, there must be a season of stillness, a time when God teaches, through silence, what could not be heard through noise. That is where your next step begins. When the noise fades and the chaos finally ends, silence can feel unbearable. After being surrounded by manipulation, words, and emotional storms, quietness feels foreign. You sit in the stillness, and suddenly every thought grows louder. Every memory replays. Every emotion you buried rises to the surface. It feels like an empty room echoing with pain. But what if that silence is not punishment? What if it is preparation? God often moves most powerfully in silence. When He removed the narcissist from your life, He was not abandoning you. He was cleansing your atmosphere. You may not have noticed how much spiritual noise surrounded you. Every lie, every argument, every insult, all of it polluted your inner peace. And when that storm finally ended, God turned down the volume so you could finally hear Him clearly. In the book of 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 12. Elijah expected to find God in the wind, in the earthquake, or in the fire. But the scripture says, after the fire came a gentle whisper. God was not in the chaos. He was in the calm. That same gentle whisper now fills your silence. But in the early days of separation, silence feels heavy. You may question your decision, replay conversations, or even miss the very person who caused the pain. This confusion is part of the healing process. It is your heart detoxing from manipulation. You became accustomed to the highs and lows, the apologies followed by blame, the emotional roller coaster. Without it, your nervous system doesn't know what peace feels like yet. This is where God begins to work deeply. He uses silence to reset your rhythm, to heal your senses, to teach you what peace sounds like. In this season, you may find yourself crying without reason, sleeping deeply one day and restless the next. You might feel both grateful and grieving at the same time. That's because you are releasing years of spiritual tension. Silence reveals what noise hides. It shows you who you are without the influence of manipulation. It reminds you that your worth is not tied to someone's attention. It reveals wounds you didn't know were there, and it gives heaven permission to heal them. When God separates you, He is not only removing the person, He is also removing the identity they built around you. The version of you that tried to earn love, fix everything, and stay strong through constant disrespect. That version is dying in this silence, and a stronger one is being born. There will be moments when you feel lonely. But loneliness is not always absence. Sometimes it is space being made for presence. Think of Moses on the mountain, Jesus in the wilderness, or David in the caves. Each of them experienced isolation before elevation. Before destiny comes solitude. Before clarity comes quiet. Psalm chapter 46 verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is not inactivity, it is sacred trust. It means allowing God to do what words and effort cannot. You cannot talk peace into existence. You must rest to receive it. In this silent season, small signs of healing begin to appear. You notice the sunlight differently. You breathe deeper. You forgive more easily. You start to understand the silence is not empty, it's full of divine presence. Every quiet morning and sleepless night is part of your restoration. The narcissist might try to reach out again, sensing your calm. They may test your boundaries, hoping to stir the old reactions. But now you have learned the language of silence. You do not need to explain your peace to those who once profited from your pain. You have learned that silence can speak louder than words, and heaven hears it all. Every quiet prayer, every sigh, every whisper of "help me," God collects them all. The book of Romans chapter 8 verse 26 says that even when you do not know what to pray, the Spirit Himself intercedes with groanings too deep for words. That is what happens in your stillness. You are not alone in your silence. Heaven is speaking on your behalf. So do not fear this season. The silence is shaping you. The quiet is cleansing you. And when the time is right, the same God who brought peace to your heart will begin to move mountains around you, because silence is not the end of the story. It is the pause before divine movement. There is a battle that takes place within the soul after every awakening, a war that cannot be seen, but it is deeply felt. It is the hidden struggle between forgiveness and justice, between peace and revenge, between holding on and letting go. When you have been wounded by a narcissist, this battle becomes very real. Because your spirit longs to forgive, but your flesh remembers the pain. You replay every insult, every betrayal, every silent punishment. You think about all the times you stayed quiet just to keep the peace. And though your lips whisper prayers of forgiveness, your heart still aches with questions. Why did this happen? Why did they get away with so much? Why did God allow me to love someone who never valued love in return? These are not signs of weak faith. They are the cries of a heart that has been deeply human and deeply faithful. The hidden battle of the heart is the place where heaven begins to do its deepest work. God knows that your spirit wants to move forward, but your emotions still bleed. That is why healing is rarely instant. It comes in waves. Some days you feel strong, and others you feel broken again. But each wave carries you closer to shore. In Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, it says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness." The narcissist may have been the vessel, but the true battle was spiritual. The enemy used their brokenness to attack your peace, your identity, your faith. But what the enemy used for harm, God is now using for strength. Forgiveness is not agreement. It is not saying, "What they did was fine." It is saying, "What they did will no longer control me." Forgiveness is a key that unlocks your chains, not theirs. It releases you from the weight of bitterness that tries to anchor your soul to the past. The enemy loves to whisper that forgiveness means weakness. But the truth is the opposite. It takes divine courage to forgive without receiving an apology. It takes supernatural strength to bless those who cursed you. Yet, that is exactly what Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 5 verse 44. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who despitefully use you. It does not mean you must invite them back into your life. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, it is release. It is trusting that God's justice is perfect even when human justice fails. It is believing that heaven keeps perfect records and that no evil goes unnoticed. Not sometimes the hardest part of this battle is surrendering the need to see their downfall. You want them to feel what you felt. You want them to understand the pain they caused. But the truth is that hunger for revenge only keeps you tied to their energy. Letting go does not mean you approve of their behavior. It means you are choosing peace over poison. Psalm chapter 37 verse 7 says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him." Do not fret when people succeed in their ways. God's justice may move slowly, but it never fails. He is not a man that He should forget, nor blind to the tears of His children. And while the Lord works on justice, He also works on you, reshaping your heart, teaching you compassion without naivety, strength without hardness, wisdom without bitterness. The heart that was once broken begins to beat differently. You start to love yourself again, to protect your peace, to trust your intuition. Soon, you will look back on this season and realize that the battle inside was never about them. It was about becoming who you were meant to be. Every tear was training. Every night of confusion was refining your discernment. Every unanswered prayer was preparing your victory. The hidden battle of the heart is painful, but it is sacred. It is the place where transformation begins. It is where anger turns into understanding, where wounds become wisdom, and where love, purified by suffering, becomes stronger than fear. And as your heart begins to heal, heaven starts to move. Because when your spirit is aligned with peace, divine justice begins its quiet work. And that is where the story turns, when heaven begins to move on your behalf. There comes a moment in every season of healing when the invisible begins to shift. You may not see it with your eyes, but you can feel it deep in your spirit. Something is changing. The same situations that once broke you no longer hold power. The same words that once crushed you now sound empty. The same memories that once kept you awake now pass like distant echoes. This is the moment when heaven begins to move. For a long time, you might have felt forgotten. You prayed, cried, fasted, and waited, yet nothing seemed to happen. But what you did not see was the silent preparation taking place behind the curtain of time. God was working, not only around you but within you. The storm that was meant to destroy you became the very force that pushed you closer to divine alignment. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 60 verse 22, the Lord says, "When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen." Heaven's movement is not rushed. It is precise. Every delay, every disappointment, every closed door, all of it served a divine purpose. You were not being denied. You were being developed. When heaven starts to move, signs begin to appear. Peace begins to return even before circumstances change. You start to feel lighter, more centered, less reactive. You stop explaining yourself to those who never listened. You no longer chase validation from people who were never meant to understand your worth. This quiet confidence is not pride, it is peace restored by grace. You begin to see the narcissist differently. Instead of viewing them as an all-powerful figure in your story, you recognize them for what they truly are, a lesson, not a destiny. You stop replaying their words because they no longer define you. You stop checking if they have changed because you no longer depend on their transformation for your freedom. That is when heaven starts showing you the fruit of endurance. New people come into your life, people who speak with honesty, who listen without agenda, who love without manipulation. Opportunities appear that you never thought possible. You begin to walk in divine timing, where things happen with grace instead of struggle. But make no mistake, when heaven moves, hell notices. The narcissist may suddenly reappear, testing your strength. Old triggers may resurface, trying to pull you back into old cycles. Do not be alarmed. This is confirmation that you are breaking free. The enemy always attacks right before elevation. The book of Exodus chapter 14 verse 13 records Moses' words to the Israelites as they stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind them. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The sea did not part until the moment they stopped running and trusted. That is what heaven asks of you now, to stand firm. Heaven's movement may look subtle at first. Small victories, gentle confirmations, divine coincidences that are too perfect to ignore. You might start seeing signs of restoration, a job that fits your purpose, health improving, relationships healing. These are not random blessings. They are proof that divine justice is unfolding. But remember, when heaven moves, it also removes. There will be people who quietly disappear from your life, not because you are being punished, but because you are being purified. God will not allow confusion to travel with you into the next chapter. He is separating wheat from weeds, truth from illusion. Your part in this season is simple. Remain faithful. Continue to pray, even when the outcome seems uncertain. Continue to walk in kindness, even when others choose bitterness. Continue to protect your peace as though it were sacred, because it is. And while you wait, give thanks. Gratitude is the language that keeps heaven open. When you thank God for what you cannot yet see, you show that your faith is greater than your fear. Philippians chapter 4 verse 6 reminds us, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." The movement of heaven is rarely loud. It happens in whispers, in timing, in small miracles that build into a greater testimony. One day, you will look back and realize that what felt like silence was actually a divine strategy. You were being positioned for restoration far greater than what you lost. Because when heaven starts to move, nothing, not even the wounds of the past, can stop what God has ordained for your future. And as that movement unfolds, another revelation is waiting, one that will change how you see everything that happened. There comes a moment when the pain begins to make sense. Not immediately, and not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. Your heart starts to understand why everything had to unfold the way it did. You begin to see that what felt like chaos was actually divine choreography. What looked like destruction was the foundation of transformation. It is in this revelation that peace takes root. Because once you understand purpose, the pain loses its power. For a long time, you may have asked, Why did this happen? Why me? But heaven rarely answers in words. Instead, it answers through realization. You begin to see that the narcissist's betrayal was not meant to break you. It was meant to awaken you. You realize that every tear made your discernment sharper. Every disappointment trained your spirit to recognize what is false. Every heartbreak taught you what real love is not. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 declares, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose." Not some things, all things. Even the betrayal, even the confusion, even the loneliness. God weaves all of it into a divine design that ultimately serves your growth and His glory. You start to see that the narcissist was not just a person, they were a mirror. They reflected back to you the parts of yourself that still needed healing. Your need to be seen, your desire to fix, your fear of rejection. These were wounds long buried beneath kindness and loyalty. God allowed their behavior to surface those wounds, not to harm you, but to heal you. The revelation continues when you realize that what you called rejection was actually protection. You prayed for peace, and God removed the one who disrupted it. You prayed for strength, and God allowed a storm to show you how strong you truly were. You prayed for truth, and He revealed it through painful exposure. It was never cruelty. It was correction. It was never abandonment. It was alignment. Sometimes, God will allow certain people into your life only for a season, because that season exposes the deeper spiritual lessons you could not have learned otherwise. The narcissist forced you to set boundaries. They taught you that love without respect is not love at all. They taught you that silence is sometimes louder than words, and that peace is not found in other people, but in God's presence. When you reach this revelation, bitterness begins to dissolve. The anger that once consumed you fades into understanding. You no longer see yourself as a victim, but as a survivor chosen for a greater purpose. You recognize that God trusted you with this experience, not to destroy you, but to equip you. You were chosen to break a generational pattern of manipulation and silence. Think of Joseph in Genesis chapter 50 verse 20. After being betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused, he stood before them years later and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." That same truth applies to your story. What the enemy used to humiliate you, God is now using to elevate you. The revelation of why it happened brings healing, but it also brings responsibility. You cannot go back to who you were. You have seen too much, learned too deeply, grown too far. You now carry wisdom that others still seek. Your story becomes a light for those still walking through the valley, and this light must be guarded. Because revelation brings clarity, and clarity attracts distraction. There will be people who try to pull you back into confusion, people who misunderstand your peace, who say you have changed. But change is not betrayal. It is evolution. The revelation of why it happened transforms how you pray. You no longer ask for escape, you ask for endurance. You no longer ask for revenge, you ask for release. You begin to see your pain as sacred training, your loneliness as divine refinement, and your silence as an answered prayer. This is the turning point. Because when you finally understand why it happened, your heart opens to the next question, what now? And that question will lead you into the next stage of your healing. rediscovering who you are without the chains of your past. There comes a quiet but powerful moment after pain, when you look into the mirror and realize you no longer recognize the person staring back at you. Not because you are lost, but because you are being reborn. For so long, your identity was shaped by what the narcissist said, wanted, and demanded. You adjusted yourself to avoid conflict. You became smaller to make them comfortable. You silenced your truth just to be heard. But now, God calls you to rediscover who you truly are. This part of the journey is sacred. It is not about finding a new you. It is about remembering the real you that was buried under survival. The one who laughed freely. The one who dreamed without fear. The one who believed love could be kind. That person never died. They were simply waiting for a safe space to breathe again. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand." That means you are not a mistake. You were handcrafted with intention, designed with purpose, and placed on this earth for a reason far greater than the pain you endured. When you were with the narcissist, you learned to adapt. You became what they needed, often at the cost of your own soul. But that season is over. Now God is stripping away every false layer, every fear, every lie, every false identity that kept you captive. You are being restored to the original design of who you were meant to be. This rediscovery begins with stillness. You start asking yourself, what brings me peace? What makes me smile? What do I truly love? At first, the answers come slowly. Trauma taught you to anticipate others' needs before your own. But with each passing day, your voice grows stronger. You start saying no without guilt and yes without fear. You start dressing, speaking, and moving in ways that reflect your authenticity instead of your anxiety. Psalm chapter 139 verse 14 says, "I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." These words remind you that your worth does not depend on anyone's approval. You were valuable before they noticed you, and you remain valuable after they left. Rediscovering yourself means walking in freedom again. Freedom to rest. Freedom to express. Freedom to believe that you deserve joy. You begin to realize that peace is not something you chase, it's something you protect. You stop explaining your boundaries because peace no longer needs permission. But this process also reveals new challenges. As you rediscover your worth, you will start to see who truly values it and who only tolerated your brokenness. People who benefited from your silence may grow uncomfortable with your strength. They may accuse you of being selfish, distant, or changed. That's because they only knew the version of you that dimmed her light to keep others warm. Do not shrink back. You are not obligated to stay in spaces that suffocate your spirit. Rediscovery sometimes means separation. And separation often precedes elevation. You will notice that God begins aligning you with people who mirror your growth, those who speak life instead of fear, who encourage instead of control, who remind you of your worth instead of questioning it. These connections are not coincidences. They are divine replacements. Slowly, your passions reawaken. You might feel drawn to create, to serve, to study, to travel, to worship more deeply. These are not distractions, they are instructions. They are reminders of the purpose God placed within you long before the pain began. You begin to walk with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but awareness. Awareness of your resilience. Awareness of your boundaries. Awareness of God's presence in every step. You stop rushing your healing because you finally understand that recovery is not a race, it's a revelation. And as you rediscover who you are, something beautiful happens. You stop identifying with what hurt you. You stop saying, "I was a victim," and start saying, "I am victorious." You no longer define yourself by what was taken, but by what is being restored. Because your true identity was never broken, only hidden. And now that it is returning to light, you will begin to attract the life that matches your healed spirit. But before that new life fully unfolds, another challenge awaits: learning to trust again without losing the lessons you've learned. Trust. The very word feels fragile after betrayal. It once came easily, but now it feels like a mountain too high to climb. After walking through manipulation, lies, and emotional chaos, the idea of opening your heart again can feel impossible. You learn the hard way that not everyone who says "I love you" means it, and not everyone who holds your hand has good intentions. But even after all that pain, God whispers a truth that challenges the fear, that love and trust are still possible. Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5 and 6 remind us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths." The journey to trust again begins here, not with people, but with God. When you trust Him first, He begins to guide you toward the right people, the right situations, and the right timing. At first, you may find yourself questioning everything: motives, words, intentions. You might even question your own judgment, wondering how you could have been so blind before. This is a natural response after trauma. Your mind is trying to protect you from repeating the same mistakes. But healing requires balance, learning to be wise without becoming suspicious, cautious without being cold. The truth is, trust is not about giving someone control. It's about giving yourself permission to hope again. It means you are willing to live with your heart open, not because people are perfect, but because you refuse to let pain make you bitter. You start by trusting in small ways. Trusting your intuition when it tells you something is off. Trusting your peace when it warns you to slow down. Trusting the voice of God when He tells you that not everyone deserves access to your spirit. Over time, you learn that trust is not something you give instantly. It is something that people earn through consistency. It's not built by words, but by patterns. A person can say all the right things, but only their fruit reveals the truth. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7 verse 16, "You will know them by their fruits." That means watch how they treat others, how they handle pressure, how they act when no one is watching. As you rebuild trust, you also begin to trust yourself again, something the narcissist tried to destroy. They made you doubt your perception, question your feelings, and second-guess your reality. But now, God is restoring that inner compass. You are learning to listen to your spirit again. You are learning that discernment is not paranoia, it is protection. You start to recognize that not everyone is your assignment. Some people come as lessons, others as blessings, and only a few as lifelong companions. The Holy Spirit gives you the wisdom to tell the difference. This is how you walk in peace while still keeping your heart soft. But trusting again doesn't mean returning to who you were. It means moving forward wiser, more grounded, more aware. You no longer ignore red flags for the sake of companionship. You no longer mistake intensity for love. You no longer try to fix broken people by breaking yourself. You understand now that real love builds. It doesn't drain. Psalm chapter 37 verse 3 says, "Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture." That verse carries a promise that when you trust God, He will lead you into safe places, safe relationships, safe peace. And in time, you will meet people who remind you that love can be gentle. They will not demand trust. They will earn it through patience. They will not rush your healing. They will honor it. They will not fear your silence. They will find comfort in it. This is the beauty of divine restoration. God will send people who show you that love is not supposed to hurt, that you don't have to walk on eggshells to be loved. That trust, when rooted in God, becomes the foundation of true connection. And once trust is restored, not in others, but in your own spirit, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that love still exists. Hope that peace is real. Hope that your story is not over. Because as trust begins to grow again, it leads to something even greater, the ability to open your heart without fear. The hardest thing after betrayal is to believe that your heart is still capable of love. After walking through manipulation and control, your heart builds invisible walls. You tell yourself you are protecting your peace, but sometimes those walls become prisons. You stop letting people close, not because you hate them, but because you are terrified of being hurt again. Yet, in this sacred season, God begins to whisper, "Your heart is still good." It was never your love that was the problem. It was where you placed it. Fear often disguises itself as wisdom. You say, "I'm just being careful," but deep down, it's fear trying to control the future. Fear tells you that if you never open up again, you'll never be hurt again. But faith reminds you that if you never open up again, you'll also never heal fully. Because love in its pure form is not a weakness. It's your greatest weapon against everything that once broke you. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love, and of a sound mind." That means fear is not from God. It's a shadow cast by past pain, trying to block the light of new beginnings. Opening your heart again does not mean rushing into relationships. It begins with small acts of trust, letting someone be kind to you without questioning their motives, allowing yourself to receive compliments, believing that goodness can exist without manipulation attached. It means saying thank you without suspicion, smiling without guilt, and resting in peace without waiting for it to be taken away. The heart heals by experiencing safety, not by avoiding it. And sometimes, that safety first appears in your relationship with God. When you feel His peace surround you, when you sense His love steady your emotions, you realize that real love doesn't confuse, it calms. It doesn't demand, it reassures. It doesn't take, it gives. When you open your heart again, you begin to love differently. You no longer love to earn worth. You love because you are already whole. You no longer chase affection. You walk in connection. You no longer give endlessly hoping to be noticed. You give because you overflow. This kind of love cannot be stolen or destroyed, because it flows from God through you. 1 John chapter 4 verse 18 says, "There is no fear in love, But perfect love casts out fear. That means when your love matures in faith, fear loses its grip. You no longer look for people to complete you. You look for those who complement your peace. You begin to approach relationships from abundance, not from lack. You realize that love is not meant to fill a void. It's meant to express a truth that you are already enough. The narcissist once convinced you that you had to prove your worth. But now you understand that true love does not ask you to shrink. It invites you to shine. Of course, your heart may still tremble at times. That's natural. Healing does not erase sensitivity. It refines it. You might still flinch when someone raises their voice or question a kind gesture. But over time, those reflexes soften. Your heart begins to trust its own rhythm again. And as your heart opens, joy starts returning in unexpected ways, through laughter, through worship, through simple moments of gratitude. You start to see beauty again, not because the world changed, but because your vision healed. Opening your heart again also means forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for staying too long, for believing lies, for ignoring red flags, for not knowing then what you know now. You realize that even those mistakes were part of your becoming. You were not foolish, you were faithful. And that faith has brought you to this very moment of transformation. So when the time comes, when someone new enters your life, or when a new chapter begins, you will not love out of fear. You will love out of wisdom. You will know when to walk away and when to stay. You will recognize peace as the language of truth. And even if love never looks the same as before, it will be purer, stronger, free of illusion. Because now your heart beats in harmony with heaven, not in reaction to pain. But before this new love arrives, whether through people, purpose, or peace, there is one more thing God will teach you: how to live with joy again. Not temporary happiness, but lasting, unshakable joy that no one can steal. After the storm, joy can feel like a stranger. You may catch glimpses of it in small moments, a laugh that surprises you, a morning that feels lighter than usual, and then it fades again. It almost feels wrong to feel happy after everything you've endured. The pain conditioned you to wait for the next disappointment, to brace yourself even in moments of peace. But God is calling you now to unlearn the reflex of fear and remember the rhythm of joy. Joy is not the same as happiness. Happiness depends on what happens. Joy depends on what you believe. It is a quiet confidence that no matter what comes next, God is still good. And you are still loved. Psalm chapter 30 verse 5 declares, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The night has been long, and the tears have been many, but your morning is beginning to break." The sunlight of peace is rising, not because the pain never happened, but because it no longer controls your days. You start learning to live with joy through gratitude. Gratitude is the doorway that joy walks through. When you begin to thank God not only for what you have, but also for what He took away, you unlock freedom. You thank Him for the doors that closed, the people who left, the silence that healed, the lessons that changed you. Every thank you shifts the atmosphere of your heart from heaviness to hope. At first, joy comes in small doses, a quiet smile, a moment of rest, a conversation that warms your spirit. You begin to notice that not every day is a battle. Some days are just peaceful. Some days are just still. And that is joy. 2.PHILIPPIANS chapter 4 verse 4 says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice." This verse is not commanding emotion, it is inviting alignment. It's reminding you that joy is a choice that flows from trust. Even in uncertainty, you can choose to rejoice because you know who holds the future. As you start to live with joy, the enemy may whisper guilt. He may remind you of everything that went wrong, trying to make you feel unworthy of laughter. But remember this, you are not dishonoring your pain by being happy again. You are honoring your healing. Joy is not denial. It is evidence that the wound has closed. Living with joy also means embracing the present moment. The narcissist once trained you to walk on eggshells, constantly anticipating what could go wrong. But now, you are learning to rest in what is right. You find beauty in simplicity, in a song, in nature, in prayer. You rediscover that life does not have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Over time, your joy becomes contagious. People begin to notice the glow in your spirit, the calm in your tone, the confidence in your walk. You no longer need to prove your peace. It radiates naturally. That's when you realize that joy is not something you chase. It's something you carry. It flows from within, from the divine presence that has never left you. Isaiah chapter 61 verse 3 promises that God will give the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. This is that promise unfolding in your life. The heaviness you once carried is being replaced by joy that cannot be shaken, and this joy does not depend on others. It is not built on external validation or temporary comfort. It is rooted in the unchanging truth that you are loved, chosen, and protected by the one who never betrayed you. As you live with joy, you also become a living testimony. Others will look at you and say, "How did you survive that?" And your peace will answer louder than words, "By grace." Your joy becomes ministry. Your laughter becomes worship. Your peace becomes proof that God restores what was lost. And just as your heart learns to rejoice again, you will begin to feel something deeper rising, the calling to share your light with others, to help those still trapped in the shadows you once escaped, because joy, once reborn, is never meant to be hidden. It's meant to overflow. There comes a moment when the soul finally exhales. The war that once raged inside your heart begins to quiet. The fear that used to chase you fades into distance. And what remains is peace, not loud or dramatic, but steady and gentle like the morning light after a long night. You are not the same person who began this journey. The tears, the heartbreak, the isolation, they all shaped something sacred within you. The narcissist thought they could destroy you, but they only helped reveal the strength that was already there. What they meant for harm, God turned into transformation. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 reminds us that all things work together for good to them that love God. Even the things that broke you, even the losses that made you question your worth, they are now being woven into something beautiful. Every unanswered prayer was protection. Every silence was guidance. Every ending was divine redirection. The days ahead will not always be easy, but they will be honest. The false peace that once came from pleasing others has been replaced with true peace that comes from trusting God. You have learned to stand alone without fear, to walk by faith and not by sight, to speak softly but carry divine power within. You will notice how your heart no longer rushes to rescue everyone, how your spirit no longer bends to be understood. You have discovered that peace is not found in controlling what happens. It is found in surrendering what you cannot change. Psalm chapter 23 verse 3 says, "He restoreth my soul." That is the quiet miracle happening even now. Your soul is being restored piece by piece, breath by breath. You are remembering who you were before the manipulation, before the confusion, before the pain. And even better, you are becoming who you were meant to be all along. Forgiveness will seal this chapter. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness does not excuse their behavior. It releases your heart from bondage. It allows you to walk freely, unchained from the weight of bitterness. When you look back, you will not see a victim. You will see a warrior of light, guided through darkness by unseen hands. You will understand that every sleepless night, every unanswered question, was leading you closer to divine alignment. Now, you stand at the threshold of something new. The past has no claim on you anymore. The narcissist's voice has gone silent in your mind, and in its place is the whisper of peace. It says, "You made it." Take a deep breath. Feel the calm within you. You are no longer defined by what was done to you, but by what you chose to become after. You are living proof that healing is real, that restoration is possible, and that God never abandons those who trust Him. This is your dawn, the beginning of a life free from fear, guided by faith and filled with quiet joy. The light after the battle is not just around you. It is within you. Before you rest tonight, remember this truth. You were never forgotten, never forsaken, never unloved. You were being prepared for this peace, for this purpose, for this new beginning.